check this one too.
This does not surprise me. We got a weird juju going on in our building.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, that's
Everything's
okay.
a little laggy.
We didn't christen. Pardon?
Yeah. We didn't. You're good.
We'll give Chris in a minute.
Okay. I'm not losing it, John. You saw it.
I saw it. I saw it.
I probably am losing it. That's weirdo.
I lost it already, so.
Nope, not yet.
Stay tuned, though.
Yeah, right.
I think you lost Chris. All right, I'd like to call the Village of Cottage Grove Village Board of Trustees to order on Monday, August 5th. It is 6:32 on my watch. We are holding this in the Village Hall as well as on Zoom. The agenda was properly posted, and we do have a quorum, and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next, then, we have public appearances. This is public's opportunity to speak. If you are from the public, we just wish that you share your name, your address, your municipality, and hold your comments to no more than 3 minutes in case we have a lot of folks who would like to speak. With that, we do have one wish to speak form, State Assembly candidate for the 46th. Jennifer, do you want to come up?
Sure. We don't have this fancy stuff. That?
Yes.
Red, did I do it right?
You did it right.
Wow, that thing's wild. All right, so I did reach out a little bit late, so I apologize for that, but out of the 19 people in this district or municipalities, most of you are on Monday nights. So this is going to be a fun one to try and meet everybody. So I'm Jenny Quimby. I'm actually running for State Assembly 46. It's in a new district, which you probably have up somewhere around here. I'm actually the mayor of Waterloo. I've been on city council since 2008, served on the school board since 2011, and was elected mayor in 19. So sit in your seats for a lot of years, and I know it's budget season, so I'll keep this short because I have another one to go to right after this. But I just wanted to introduce myself and let you know who I am, and basically why I'm running is because I care about all things municipality. Commenting on your parking lot, we're doing that right now in Waterloo too, so it's fun with that. But the things I care about are roads, schools, funding for police departments and fire departments. I really think fire departments should have more money instead of all the volunteers. So that's one of the things I'm very passionate about. I do believe our state aid formulas need to be revamped. I think we all got a little bit of an increase last year with the 2-year budget. So going into this next election cycle, that would be a part of my world, even though as a freshman, I probably wouldn't be on finance right away. But it's something that I've been in my entire career. I have a bachelor degree in business and operations management, and I've had my own business for 20 years and still want to keep going. So, and I don't have to give up being mayor. So I appreciate everything you all do back here, and I'm sorry that this is short and sweet, but you do have my information. So there's Facebook, website, all the traditional stuff. But if anybody wants to reach out personally or ask me any questions or would like me to come back, I'd be happy to do that. And that's it. Thank you very much. Go budget season.
Thanks, Jenny. Anybody else in the room or on Zoom that wish to speak? All right, then with that, we'll move on. Next, then, discuss and consider our meeting minutes from the regular village board meeting held on July 15th and the special meeting held on July 18th. Any questions, comments in regards to the meeting minutes as presented?
I'll make a motion to approve the meeting minutes as presented for July 15th, 2024 and July 18th, 2024.
I'll second.
We have a motion and second then. Any other discussion? Having heard none, all those in favor? Anybody opposed? Anybody abstain? Motion carries. Then we'll slide down to unfinished business, starting off with discuss and consider e-waste and bulk item pickup options from with Pelletieri. Cameron's pulling up the memo.
Yep. So as you guys remember, we had just some general discussion about service levels for the new contract for waste and recycling services. On July 17th, I met with Pelletieri just to kind of discuss a couple of the different options that are available to us. It is important to point out that, again, our contract only covers both single-family residents all the way up to units of 4 or less. So any type of service that's provided in pure pickup would only cover those services, so bulk item pickup, et cetera. That becomes a little bit more important when we talk about bulk item. One of the items here that makes a lot of sense in my mind and has a lot of value is the e-cycle event. So again, in lieu of the prior, the way that it was done in the prior contract, Pelletieri would, they'll do it as frequent as you'd like, but they would do a one-time event where things could be brought to a village designated site. And the cost of that would be about $5,000. What's good about, I believe, this event in lieu of a door-to-door pickup is this would extend the service to all residents, not just ones that are in 4 units or less, or 4 units or less. Additionally, for the bulk item pickup, we kind of have 3 options to talk about. One item would be not providing any free bulk item pickup and just offering the pay-as-you-go service. The other option would be similar to what's done in Wanakee and other communities. Pelletieri would drive along the existing routes, so 4 units or less. It would take approximately about a week and have a one-time kind of event or a 1-week event to pick up large items based off of our projected route, and again, high-level estimates, it would be about $10,000 to offer that service once a year. The second option would be similar to the e-cycle event, where we would have dumpsters selected at a village designated drop-off site, and the cost of just the garbage component of that would be $3,000 to $4,000 per event. In this option, you could roughly cover 2 events for the same cost as the once bulk item pickup at each resident's house. Again, I do want to clarify, both proposals did not include a free bulk item pickup with the contract. That was, again, before Veolia and Advanced Disposal was acquired by Waste Management. Those are things that were included in our contract. So ultimately, my recommendation tonight is the village direct staff to sponsor an e-cycle event include it in the budget for 2025. The cost would be about $2.27 annually for each customer to offer that event. Secondly, I recommend the board discuss both options for bulk items. This could be included. This could include not providing either option as a way for cost savings to residents who don't directly utilize the service. So again, it is a service that would be offered, but there is obviously a cost to providing the service. So just looking for some direction tonight.
All right, thanks, Cameron. Up to the board.
Yeah, I guess I have one question on that. So, like in DeForest and some parts of Madison, there is a per fee pickup. Did they provide like a table for that if it was a per fee pickup?
Yep,
Or
and
per item?
Yep.
Fee?
And so there is a table and it's indexed by year. When that is official, we go ahead and make that table readily available for our residents. There are some things that both providers aren't capable of processing that we would say, like certain types of oils and et cetera. I don't want to call out anything particular because I don't have the list down. But Dane County Sweep Program is kind of a in combination provides kind of all services.
Can you talk a little bit about the logistics of coordinating like a drop-off sites?
Sure.
What
So
that might also cost the village, I guess.
when we met with Waste Management at the beginning of 23, we had some not contract changes, but lead contract change. And one of the things that at the Director Peterson at the time had just mentioned some concerns about if we host a drop box, we're ultimately responsible for any environmental problems. Like let's say somebody throws a can of oil and it gets into the ground, et cetera. So logistically, that would be one concern I have. Ideally, we would want to work with Public Works to identify a spot and location that kind of mitigates those concerns. I didn't know, JJ, off the top of your hand or top of your head, what your recommendation would be.
I'd say we could talk about the pros and cons of a couple of different spots, but we could definitely find.
And one of the things they definitely said was a duration. We don't want to make the event too long. In both instances, we do not have a defined cost, like a not to exceed certain amount. It is, we will have to pay the fees to dispose the items. So, we get 4 overflowing dumpsters, we'll have to pay the 4. I worked with Pelletieri and took the 3 communities with the highest dispensable incomes and rounded up for cost. So hopefully this would be a cost that would be probably the maximum we would see. Given that it would be the first time we would throw the event next year, that's probably the year we're going to see the highest demand. I do think I've had several calls, during the e-cycle pickup about people a little bit nervous about leaving devices, on their curb. Obviously people are afraid to get their data stolen. I would think, we would want to make clear that we as a village wouldn't be, even if a drop-off site, we would not want to be responsible for anything on those devices. So just some communication saying, make sure you're clearing, your hard drives, et cetera. This is just a way to sustainably recycle these items. So ultimately, because sustainability falls under Public Works Commission, I would kick it off to them for planning logistics and then maybe bring a recommendation to the board. Pelletieri did mention they could care less if we did this one year and didn't want to do it and switch it up. So they just said there doesn't have to be anything baked into the contract that says we have to go with this every year for 10 years. So ultimately, if we provide an e-cycle event or multiple bulk item pickup events and we decide that's not what we want to do, or budget constraints going on, we're not tied, our hands aren't tied to anything.
Just to follow up on that a little bit, do you know if we provide the staffing to coordinate the event, or does Pelletieri provide staffing for that type of event?
So the 2 events that were described where we provide the staffing, so they recommended having, some type of staffing or at least, monitoring of the event. They said some communities do, some communities don't. Some communities are like, okay, well, we got our 3 dumpsters full. That's all we're going to take. It will take some coordination for sure.
Right, because we'd want to, I don't know, we could check for residency or something along those lines. And yeah, that takes, volunteers or staff time to allocate to that.
Yeah, and because the town does have a bulk item, or I would imagine continue some type of bulk item event, I'm not overly concerned about getting a ton of town stuff. I think an event like this potentially prevents things from building up, like in front of people's houses or, people who just don't have a way to get rid of things. I think that the decision here is, should the village foot that bill, or if residents would like those items picked up, should they be responsible? So that's kind of what the focus should be on.
Yeah, that was, you got to kind of one of my points then about the bulk item. I think if we don't have a bulk item, like you do drive around other communities and you see items that are set out at the curb, and those won't get picked up unless someone pays to pick them up, or if it sits there long enough, neighbors would call and we'd have to get a hold of the property owner to have them pick it up. Like, I could see the benefit of having a once-a-year event, like.
Yeah, it's potentially a policy. I think similar to like snow or weeds, our policy could be, well, if it sits out there for so long, we'll pay Pelletier to do it, but then we'll ultimately charge it back on the property taxes. Again, that you don't want to be punitive in that way, but either way, you can't go wrong. It's just a preference.
Right, so the benefit of having a once-a-year bulk item pickup is that people would potentially save those items until that event comes along, or, and you wouldn't have stuff sitting out for a month and neighbors calling and, getting, even harder to move because of, weather, or, I would be in favor of having a, once-a-year bulk item event if we wanted to go that route.
I know I'm the one kind of brought this up in the beginning, so I'm also in support of it. I just wonder about the capacity, right? So communication piece of getting that out to the community. Do you think that you can effectively do that? And
I do. So Pelletier gives you kind of 2 options, because as we build that relationship and build, people signing up for notifications, eventually they'll be able to help push things out, for us on a lot of things. I do think, though, we would want to make sure residents are aware, whether that be on a combination of the utility bill, we're talking about monthly e-delivery of things that are happening, whether that be in a mailer. I think there will be a way to effectively communicate that.
A couple of thoughts I have. When I think about the things that I've put out for bulk pickup, it's because I can't fit them in my car to take them anywhere. And so I wonder how helpful having a drop-off site would be if somebody doesn't have a truck or something to actually put the sofa in, or the, whatever it is, the cabinet that I'm trying to dispose of. And so that I see that as a potential barrier. I would want at least to still have the option to do the pay for pickup.
Yep, and that will be included no matter what. So
Okay.
That pay schedule for items will be available all year long.
Okay.
What's kind of nice about that event and the app is it's very clear when it's going to be picked up. I think right now we've had some challenging with the way the addressing is and waste management, and sometimes people can find their address and they can't. The system works sometimes, it doesn't work sometimes. So a lot of that burden does fall on staff. I'm hopeful, at least, that the Pelletier system would be a little bit more robust, but we haven't had any experience with it yet.
Yeah, I guess I just wonder how many people would have things that they can actually transport to a bulk drop-off site on a specific week.
Well, and what about the residents who don't have the ability to move those, like you said, with the cars, but physically unable to do that? Does the village assist those
I think that's the
individuals in
pay
some
for
way?
pickup, right?
So then they don't have the opportunity to take advantage of the free
Well,
1 week, or,
You got the object somehow. I mean, I think as long as there's an opportunity to pick stuff up. I mean, my concern is residents have something they want to get rid of, and if there's one event a year, 2 events a year, to have an option to pay to get rid of it, I mean, people don't want to sit on stuff, right? I know a lot of people want to get rid of it, you just don't want it sitting in your garage for 6 months. So I think that's really, really important that that's available. I guess the question is, how do we deal with your question, Cindy? And more importantly, do we do 1, 2? I mean, once a year, you're going to have an object sit in your garage or in your house you want to get rid of for 6 or 9 months. That's really not a service.
But if you don't have the $25 to pay, you could keep that in your garage for 6 months until the free, and otherwise you pay the $25,
Yeah, that's
for
your,
example.
that's your option.
Right.
I think that's a really good trade-off.
Maybe we do it for 1 year and see how much people use it. Offer, so, because it's not like, what I understood, Cameron, is it's not just a flat 10,000, for example. It would be however much gets
Yep.
brought to the site would be how much we pay for. So if not very many people drop anything off that week, it wouldn't cost us.
Yeah, and there's very few weeks that, so obviously Pelletier has set customers in our base. So there's some weekends that, because they're doing these events at other communities, they said, well, we won't be able to provide optimal service these weeks. So yes, you can still have them these weeks, but we would recommend other weeks. Again, I think that's completely reasonable. I appreciate the candidness there on what they can and can't provide. The other question kind of comes here. So the way the service is funded is through a user charge on the tax roll, meaning, so if we put the monthly charge on the individual, the conversation might have to be, well, for the service that's not just the people who are paying it, that probably needs to be budgeted elsewhere, because you would have the people who aren't getting charged for 4 units and above getting paid for by the people with 4 units and above, if I would blend those costs together. So that money has to come directly from the tax base then. So that's just one of the things, a consideration here. Technically, you shouldn't be charging a user fee if it doesn't directly correlate with the service being provided. Again, I'll work through all of that once you guys make a decision on how I would recommend funding it, but just something to think about.
I was wondering then about the e-cycle event. So do we have sustainability, like we used to have a sustainability line item, right, in the budget?
And this is what I think this is building on that sustainability line, and I think that's an excellent use of it. Additionally, we do qualify for the Responsible Recycling Business Unit grant annually. So that grant that the state gives us, while it's pennies on the dollar, does help us offset some of the costs for doing events like that or other types of services.
And so then this event wouldn't be, it would be, I know it's like out of the same pocket kind of thing. It would be available to all village residents regardless of what size unit you lived in, and paid out of the general fund, like a sustainability item.
Yep.
Is that, okay. But using the same vendor as we use for our pickup.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Good questions, thank you.
I guess I'm in favor of e-cycle events, hopefully around the Earth Day time period. And I think I'm opposite of Sarah, where I would prefer to wait a year and do the fee first pickup, and then reevaluate next year and get more information on whether residents would prefer a bulk item week-long drop-off site, what the logistics look like, what the staffing looks like, that kind of thing, and then move forward 2026.
Sounds reasonable to me. Thank you, Sarah.
Motion.
I'll second Cindy's motion. Okay.
Okay. We have a motion and second then. Any other discussion? Having heard none, all those in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? Anybody abstain? Motion carries. Next, for unfinished business, then we have discussed and consider a display of flags policy.
So this is a fairly simple policy modeled after, I think it was McFarland. And it maintains basically the authority of the board to determine what type of commemorative flag would be flown on village flagpoles. You can really do just about anything you want here. This was just an effort to try to kind of give you something to start discussion as to how you wanted to handle it.
I just have a couple comments on it, I guess.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Just a period at the end of the first paragraph. And I didn't realize, I guess for C, we have a village flag? Is that, am I reading that right? Village flag means official flag?
Yeah, I
of the
didn't know we had a village
didn't
flag
know.
either, but if we ever do, it's one of the ones that we could fly.
Oh, so
And I
this
like
is
it in the
like-
policy that way.
Okay, just because it doesn't fit in, I didn't know we had one, so I was just questioning that.
Matt, do we got a village flag? Okay. But if we do, we can fly it.
I guess in D, I was wondering if we are maybe adding a little bit too many restrictions. And just wanted to know the why behind the United States Capitol, State of Wisconsin Capitol for the previous 10 years.
The why behind what, sorry?
In D. The what, just is it, are we providing excess restriction, I guess? And could that be potentially eliminated to give a little bit more wiggle room? Under policy compliance, under B, I wondered if that should just, the village administrator, do you add deputy administrator or public works in there to also give a little bit more?
I'm fine with that. I think D, I understand your concern, but D itself follows what the U.S. State Capitol in Wisconsin has done, and I think the flags that we've flown fall within that. So I think that certainly provides some guardrails. The last one we want is somebody wanting to fly a flag for someone's birthday or something that's just very non-village related. So I do think that this really provides some guardrails that make a lot of sense to me.
I guess I agree.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I was just gonna say, I agree with Cindy. I don't think we need to be constrained by what the U.S. Capitol or state does. I mean, it's gotta be approved by the board. I don't think we're gonna approve someone's birthday flag or something like that.
Right, I guess that goes under number 4, commemorative flags under B. And then commemorative flags, I guess under 4B, B, 1B, it's just Village Hall, municipal services, can that just be adjusted to village buildings? Or I know we're calling out 2, and that's all we have right now, but I guess if we're thinking, future thinking. Anyway, that's all I have.
So this is a policy, it's not an ordinance. So how does this fit into the broader picture, Larry?
Well, that's a good point. There's no reason why there couldn't be an exception. So if you don't think of everything that you want changed in this process, you can approve whatever you want. I think the point of it really is to have something that's outward facing when someone comes in and makes a request. And if someone made a request for a flag, for instance, if in a community that adopted the definition of commemorative flag as it's written here, the first direction to that person would be, well, it has or it hasn't been flown at the U.S. Capitol or state capitol, and if it has, it's within the policy. It's more of a communication tool really than anything, because the board can change in any moment or completely rescind this policy at the same time it's deciding whether to approve a flag. So I think it's important to set expectations consistent with what the board would like to see.
I think it's a great foundation, and as long as it's just a policy, and Cindy, if someone comes in with a flag and the board agrees we can fly it, Larry, that doesn't prevent the board from taking action. But if somebody came and said, I want to fly a flag for my club, it would come to the board because it doesn't follow this policy, and it would come up for discussion. They may not even bring it to the board if they think it's kind of, a little excessive relative to how the policy is positioned and how the flag would be received, right?
That's right, and that argument goes either way,
Yeah.
whether it's a less specific definition or a more specific one. But to be clear, all of those requests would come to the board, whether they're
Yeah.
within the policy or not.
But it's a policy that can be shared with anybody who's requesting to fly a flag. I think it's great. So do we need a motion on this? We do?
Yes.
I'll make a motion to approve the policy as presented.
I'll second, and I'll also voice my favor of a commemorative centennial Village of Cottage Grove flag, if we want to consider that. I like banners and flags, so never mind me.
JJ, the banners are coming, right?
Oh, the banners have been up for a while,
Oh, there you go.
but we can add commemorative flag to the list.
We can think about it, just throwing it out there.
All right. Any other discussion?
Yeah, if we took out that part and then 2D, I'd vote for this, but if we're gonna leave it in, I'm not gonna vote for it.
Instead of the must, could it say should? Or does that soften
Yeah.
it enough for you, Chris? I don't know, what do you others think?
I would agree with that.
I would agree with
We
that.
could leave it in if we can
I would agree with
change
that.
that language.
Should.
Should instead of must.
All right.
Yeah, I'll amend the motion to approve the flag policy as presented with the modification of section 2D to reflect the word should instead of must.
I'm still good with it.
Okay. All right, any other discussion? Having heard none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Any abstain? Motion carries. Next, then, we have discussing, consider the 2025-2034, it's amazing to even say that, that's far out, draft capital prioritization plan. So Cameron, you already have it up.
Thanks, John. I promise you guys won't get sick of me talking tonight. So one of the suggestions from last year was kind of clarifying and refining what that process does, kind of some of the history, and how did we get to what's being presented in front of you tonight for consideration. So, first and foremost, this is all driven by the why. So the first point for those who it's a little small to read, GFOA recommends that governments develop a viable overall multi-year financing plan covering the multi-year period of a capital plan to ensure that the proposed capital plan is achievable within expected available resources. Financing strategies should align with the expected project requirements while sustaining the financial health of the government. I also wanted to take an opportunity to point out from our most recent ratings, one of the things that the rating agency consistently has had in our call the last several years is, we consider management strong with good financial management policies and practices that include its comprehensive budget construction and monitoring, long-term financial and capital planning, and reserve policy that calls for maintaining 20 to 30% of general fund expenditures. I'm not going to read every slide, but the reason why I paused and read both of these very carefully was this is really what drives this process and why we have to have such a comprehensive approach to long-term capital planning. So most importantly, when we start kind of talking about, what creates the financial realities, which is in this case, when we're talking about capital projects with the intent to borrow for, that's our equalized value. So on August 1st, the state released our updated preliminary equalized value. We have until tomorrow to contest if we don't feel like it's accurate. Based off of my review, I don't see any concerns. Everything looks to be properly accounted for. But as you can see, increasing quite rapidly over the course of even the last 5 years. And why that's kind of important to understand is when we start talking about flat percentages, like 75% of X number, that number is increasing, the equalized value is increasing because the amount of development in the village. And because it's increasing at such an exponential rate, that's why I try to avoid, saying we should stay at this specific percentage, because that kind of excludes the whole factor of, okay, well, we can borrow for this, but what is the financial impact of borrowing? What would taxes do if we implemented a plan that had us around a certain percentage of our debt? So as a reminder, our debt capacity is based off of 5% of the village's equalized value. So this chart should look somewhat familiar, but the top line is what our statutory limit is. And again, that's defined as the 5% of our equalized value. That yellow line is a line of what 75% of our capacity would be based off of that value. And then that bottom green line is what our current GO debt outstanding. I have gotten some feedback from residents kind of asking, well, why are we so in debt, or why does the village take out so much debt? And again, that's very intentional. So the state allows us in our current levy limit worksheet to take an adjustment to pay for financial improvements. So with the way our current levy system, the way it works is we are allowed to increase our levy by net new construction from our prior year. That would basically allow us to do 0 capital improvements every year. This year, our net new construction, I believe, was 4.35%. Again, just came out on Monday, and that would result in the village being able to increase its levy from the prior year of $109,000. So that's covering all services, any type of increase in service costs for our existing services. That's the current bucket we're starting off with in this budget cycle. So while that might not be the ending number on what we're able to increase, because we might have some flexibility and some levers we haven't pulled yet, that is really why, because we can take out debt and use that as an adjustment, why the state kind of more or less forces municipalities to take out debt to do improvements, because that is a dollar for dollar increase. We can increase the levy. Now, the subsequent year, we have to reduce our levy by that dollar amount, and we only can increase it back by the amount of debt service cost. There's a caveat to that. Because we have that flexibility, you have to be very careful when approving capital projects, because it has the most direct impact on when taxes increase for the village year over year. So when we take a look at kind of our general obligation, so this is what we're so hyper-focused on when we're talking about capital projects. It's also kind of important to know, while we don't have to, sometimes it makes sense for the water and sewer utility to also issue general obligation debt. Now, that debt is not paid for by the taxpayers. It is paid through user fees. Again, a lot of the times it might make more sense to do that if it's combined with other borrowings. It could result in a lower debt issuance cost. Similarly, if something's financed through a TIF district, or the yellow portion of this bar graph, that again is being paid for solely by increment generated by that district. So that's if we have to do an improvement or some projects within the TIF districts, that is that portion of the graph. And the green portion of this graph is really the one you should be paying most attention to. This is the one that has 100% direct impact on the taxpayers. And so I know we've been talking about 75%. Because of the level that, or the pace that the village is growing, there might be times in the near future that we maybe rely on GO debt for some utility improvements or some TIF district improvements, solely because overall it's going to be more beneficial for the village in the overall plan. Again, any of those discussions will be had at this board level, but more or less why we don't want to pinpoint any specific percentage on getting to. So again,
Can we just go back for a second?
Sure.
Am I allowed to interrupt you? It's the three of those added up together, right? That saying under the statutory limit and 75%.
Yep, so,
Okay.
so the three of these together are actually gonna be the total
green
of this
line.
green line.
Okay.
Yep.
So right now we're at 20 million for the geo debt.
31 million. I
31.
apologize, I should have ledgers on it that have the dollar amounts. But yes, right now we're at about 31 million.
Okay.
But again, one of the things you'll look at here is the difference between 23 and 24. We issued quite a bit of TID 9 debt this past year. So that was a big driver on why you saw this piece. As you can see, we've been very intentional about keeping this level of water and sewer debt. Basically only financing the minimum because we don't, it's a cost benefit analysis. Because the water and sewer utility can issue revenue bonds and that doesn't count towards our geo debt, we want to be very careful what we utilize geo debt for the utilities. However, we don't want our utilities to suffer because there's not geo debt, because the users, call it taxes, call it user fees, it all is going to directly impact our residents. So we want to make sure we're always issuing debt at the most appropriate cost for those projects and minimizing that cost. Good question. Kind of how that leads into this discussion, intended purpose of this plan. This plan is really to demonstrate to external stakeholders and rating agencies the comprehensive planning process is being completed that places an emphasis both on fiscal responsibility and sustainable infrastructure reinvestment. The sustainable infrastructure reinvestment is those two other buckets we've kind of talked about that in last year's change in the overall policy, we allocated just $1 million in basically maintenance of our roads and then another $1 million in our fleet year over year. You will later on when I get to speak again, sorry for the long meeting tonight, that is gonna start to have a very positive impact in the maintenance dollars that's required. Right now, much of our fleet is aged to the point where we're spending considerable maintenance dollars year over year to keep it running. Secondly, this plan really provides direction to staff on projects to include in the draft 2025 financial management plan, transparency to external stakeholders, and again, estimate project costs related to preliminary project scope. Non-intended purpose of this plan. This plan is not intended to provide budget or expenditure authority, bind future boards to adhere to the plan, serve as a formal capital improvement plan, or finalize the scope of projects. Each project will need to go through the annual budget cycle or equivalent board action. So kind of just to highlight the timeline that has taken us from this far. So first, on April 1st, we really kicked off the process. That's when department heads really started going through, through April 1st through May 31st to compile everything, get estimates, dust off old projects from last year, see what environment has changed. One of the bigger changes from last year to this year was all the work that JJ and his staff have been doing on the bike ped plan. And then from from June 1st to July 5th, I basically were like, okay, it's great that you provided all these projects, but I'm going to do my own due diligence on the projects that were submitted. Does this align with what Strand has provided from an overall estimate? Is the justification enough meat to formally present to the board in the survey? And then we kicked it off from July 8th till July 22nd. You all completed the survey, and I really appreciate the time and effort. On average, it took the board 58 minutes per response. So everybody, that was the average. It's not the mean. I did try to throw, it might look like one person had the survey open and then it might have been on in the background. So it said like 2 or 3 days. I did exclude that one from the response to give a better summary. And then from July 23rd through August 1st, the plan that is in front of you tonight, again, is a first attempt solely based off of board grading. It had nothing to do with if I take something out of the plan and put it a different year, would it overall fit? It was at a certain board rating or lower, it was excluded from the plan. So I urge you guys tonight, as you're working through this, there were, I believe, 11 projects, which I'll get to. Well, we'll get to that in a second. So the current year factors that impacted on the plan, I'm sure those who were here last year realize that, you know, well, wait a second, you know, we went from a 4 to 6 million per year to, or the 4 million being the big bucket of projects to 2 million. What changed from last year? And then the second question I got, I would, if I were you guys, I would think, okay, well, if equalized value is increasing at such a rapid rate, why isn't that 4 to 6 million changing each year? That number is really devised on, if we continue to see the growth we're seeing, what is a kind of all-in dollar amount that I would recommend as a starting point? So I felt that given the rate that equalized value was increasing, I still wouldn't recommend increasing in the 10-year plan that average, just given what it would have as an impact on the plan. And then the police station, obviously estimating at $20 million, you know, simple math. If you take 4 to 6 million a year in financing, so let's just say 60 minus 20 million, that left 40 million for the plan, 20 million for major projects, and $20 million for vehicle and regular maintenance. Highlights of the plan, again, 36 projects were submitted for prioritization, a 56.5% increase from last year. Again, this is year 2 of this process. So the increase in number of projects doesn't surprise me. Currently, all projects are funded with a board score of 3.0 or a C+ grade have been included. 2 projects that scored a 3.14 or a C+ were included in the plan. These projects were kept in the plan primarily due to including an ADA enhancement, which I have included. One of those was Community Park. Sean spent some time on getting some additional pictures, and then the other one is North Lawn. But then the remaining projects with the 3.14 projects were cut from the plan, which resulted in a total of 11 projects that were cut. Again, a reminder that the tax impact of the plan is not accounted for in what's presented in front of you. Thus, during the financial management plan process, projects may need to be removed or added to achieve a certain annual estimated tax increase. Kind of next steps, kind of what I envision this mini workshop to be. You know, the board discussed the draft 2025-2034 prioritization plan. Similar to the budget meeting, I will take some notes regarding suggested changes, if needed, to be included in the motion. Then the board will either approve plan as is or with modification. Once this discussion is done tonight, I'll work with Ellers to start incorporating into the FMP. Any projects with a 25 or 26 have implied staff direction to start working with engineer or consulting services to refine costs, project scopes, etc. 2 projects currently have a budgeted engineer dollars in 24 budget. That is East Taylor Wheelbridge and Bike Path Extension. Projects in 26 would have proposed engineering dollars in 2025. So that's really important to understand while you're looking at this plan. Any projects that are public works or building improvements that have $26, we would need to incorporate that in the 25 budget, which is a year before the work is done, to make sure it's ready for the 26 construction year. And then just a reminder, all projects must come back to the board during the budget process or equivalent board action. And that's it for my presentation. So I'll kind of go back to, I'll leave this slide up, and I will formally kick it off to you, John, for your guys' discussion.
All right, thanks, Karen. And again, appreciate everybody's time put into filling out the survey and really looking at this with a keen eye. So with that, I'll turn over to the board for thoughts.
I guess one thing I'd like to get some feedback from fellow board members on is the community park improvements with the shelter. So that's something we had talked about that, you know, is coming up on the horizon after doing the playground and the pickleball and getting that set, that eventually the shelter would need to be either replaced or remodeled. And we've had a lot of talk about community space and where can groups meet, where can we hold library programming. Parks and Rec could expand to additional programming if we have another space. So that's kind of where that thought came from for a 4-season shelter consideration in that spot, considering it's in a location that has a parking lot, it's an off-site, and we could remodel or rebuild to a year-round shelter that has a key fob entry, could be programmed, could be utilized for community groups, for programming. So I kind of wanted to get, you know, it didn't really score very high, but in discussion and kind of what's behind that thought, just wanted to get some thoughts from fellow board members on, that's kind of like an interim community space that maybe we haven't thought of before, that maybe we should think about some more.
Heidi, has Parks talked about this at all? I'm just curious.
I've talked to Sean about it. We haven't had it on a parks agenda necessarily.
Okay.
Have we? I don't remember talking about it at committee.
We have not, other than just during the budget process.
So just a reminder, the project that Heidi is speaking towards, again, that would include demolishing the current, building a 1,200 square foot building, enclose the space with air conditioning, both heat and air, new utilities, water, sewer, natural gas, communications. And then the Band-Aid is just kind of addressing ADA, kind of a full remodel of specific spaces. But again, not changing really the overall current functionality. So this is the secondary. I apologize that it's a little tiny.
So you think it's a Band-Aid?
I think when you look at the increased residents in the village, and correct me if I'm wrong, Sean, the overall shelter occupancy rate, I mean, most of Bakken Park is rented every weekend. Eventually it would be nice to have another shelter because these are revenue generators. To offer as another option so again, when we're talking about keeping dollars in the community, people don't look to other communities to throw events, etc.
I guess I am obviously all for community space. I think I'm the one that probably ranked it the lowest though, and I did that just because strictly in going off of the criteria that staff established. It's $1.3 million, and there were no operational costs that were included in the justification, and so I was not happy seeing it presented that way, which is why I also scored it low. I also think that, it was put in year, 2026. Without knowing now that Parks hasn't discussed it formally too, so those are mine.
Yeah, I ranked it low for the same reasons. Obviously, when you look at the condition of that building, something has to be done. So when you look at trying to prioritize stuff, yeah, I'd love to have that space. And, I guess if the long-term plan is we've got this couple, the Hamburg new park, that's gonna be a big park. Again, that didn't make it. But again, where should that space be? If we're gonna spend that kind of money, I'm not quite sure it's the right spend right now, given the other priorities.
Unfortunately, we're all put in a position where we do only have the $2 million a year, and I think that we only hit that in this plan in 3 years, in 29, 30, and 31, right? If you add up the buckets, we're only sticking to our criteria that are outlined here in 3 of the 10 years.
Yeah, is caveat to that, the kind of the vehicles bucket and the road maintenance bucket on the 2 former bucket, or the 2 latter buckets. A budget will not be presented that's greater than what's kind of been earmarked, unless there's 500,000 being asked for the fire department. Well, we believe it strongly it would be a good idea to do X. So when you start to get anything out 3 or 4 years out, some of that stuff is really preliminary at this point, but kind of this is right now our general plan on how we are going to adjust that fleet. So again, really focusing on the major projects here. The major projects in total, if you kind of add back the PD, do fit within the guidelines.
And I think the community park situation is fairly urgent in terms of doing something, and so it's not like, if we're gonna do the $1.5 million and build this new shelter, we've got to deal with the problems we got over there in terms of the condition of the building and the other issues that are currently there. And I don't know if there's a lower cost solution to Band-Aid it if we wanted to continue to earmark $1.5 million for a new 4-season facility, but my understanding is that 335 is kind of like the bare bones minimum in terms of addressing the ADA issues and the condition of the building.
That's probably a high side.
Okay.
Again, we can't come to you with numbers and say it's going to cost $250 and then it's $261. Again, the board would be much more appreciative if we came at that and it was $30,000 less. So again, that's kind of, if we really come across anything, we believe this was going to be what's going to be needed. There's a lot of components to community park, and part of when we go through this process, that's kind of the tough part. It's like, yeah, you want to do everything. There's a path part of this project. There's a shelter part of this project, so it's like, what level of investment is needed? I'll tie this to the Shady Grove Park. One of the things when I was compiling this is tough is when we collect park fees, we are on the hook for doing something. So the longer we wait to do a required park, because the more expensive it becomes. So what you see in front of you is let's get this built kind of more or less as soon as possible, and we'll continue to collect those fees as that gets developed. So again, that is not a fully debt project. Community is a little bit more tough to fund because a lot of that is coming from just debt. And so again, because there would have to be engineering dollars for this during the budget process, parks can do a little bit more, if it stays in the plan and you guys want to see the 2 options a little bit more on what a 26 would be, that's when we could really unleash, Strand and others to make sure, this is what we could do, and this is more or less exactly what it could cost.
What would be the length of however much longer we would extend the life of that shelter if we got it up to compliance? Are we talking, we're going to delay it for 5 years, 10 years? What is that? Right now, it's in rough shape.
The biggest thing is the ADA accessibility.
Yep.
The building's not going to fall down.
No.
I would say 15 years, 10 to 15 years for sure.
Yeah. And I apologize, I probably said Band-Aid, and that means something different to everybody. Typically, I would look at that, and why I use that term is, as residents grow, what is the stress being put on that specific service? I do think that why it was included in the plan is something needs to be done as the pictures to make sure it's an accessible site. But what that decision is kind of up to this group.
So if the building's really not that bad of shape, when I look at $300,000 and I'm looking at concrete, some trip hazards, what else is there? We got to get a ramp out of the parking lot and then deal with the trip hazards. Are there other ADA things that are driving that number, Sean?
The bathrums, for
Oh,
sure.
yeah,
The
yeah,
bathrooms
okay,
are not
thank you.
accessible. Electricity is in really rough shape as well.
Okay.
Plumbing, a lot of that stuff was constructed in the
Okay.
70s, so that ties up a lot of it.
I just want to go back to the main reason why I would very much like to take next year to figure out which option might fit best is in the plan, I don't see many opportunities for us to increase like a standalone community space that could be utilized by community groups, rented for bridal showers, baby shower. I know that's not necessarily our purpose here, but we could have groups clubs that could meet there, civic organizations that could meet there, again, generate revenue. There's not much room to do, in my opinion, something significantly more expensive than this. So I see this as an opportunity in this 10-year plan to provide that for the community and make it relatively connected with bike path plans. So I think I would be in favor of at least exploring what that might look like more next year.
Sounds like you have an agenda item or two for the parks.
Would that be something that we would look into next year and then add into future plans? Or do we want to look at, like, it's kind of a chicken or egg. Do we want to see what the financial impact would be before we even went down that road?
This plan is completely flexible. It can change about 50 times between now and the budget, and then it can change 50 times next year. So you just need to give us direction, and Ellers will work with what you give.
You know, I guess I'm kind of with you on this one. When you look at the numbers in here, there's a $600,000 project that I didn't rank very high because you can get access to community park on the sidewalks on Southern Grange. That to add that $600,000 path, it seems like it would be better served, in my opinion, to include that along with the 335, and you've nearly funded that space. It's just my 2 cents. And again, it limits the access in terms of sidewalk access to just Southern Grange, but there is sidewalk access from BB to Community Park. So just my thoughts.
So Heidi, the direction I need from you and the group is, should the 351, 750 in 2026 stay as a placeholder, or should it be eliminated until it's refined?
I think we have to do something for ADA. So if we wouldn't eliminate it altogether, it would be at least that, or consider doing more in the future. I don't know if anyone else has another thought.
Does it cost us to get more information on specifically the cost? Right, we have to pay Strand to analyze it.
Cost benefit analysis, you're gonna wanna study it, or what you get, so like, is that 1 point, and actually in the year would be 1,575,000. Would it be worthwhile putting in 25 some engineering dollars to ultimately design, study, bring back to this board, and then make a decision? Probably. If the board wants to create some type of 4-season new shelter and says, well, Sean, you can't spend more than $1 million, then we turn them around and say, well, what can we do for $1 million to make it more palatable? Also direction. But I think maybe what I'm hearing is we include some type of engineering dollars in 25, and then we can present that during the budget cycle. Again, budget review committee, final budget workshop. And then again, the whole year will go by until it has to be discussed. The full scope really has to be finalized.
And maybe in that time, the park committee can be talking about, is Community Park even the right park to have a 4-season shelter at? I don't know.
Right, yeah, it's the one on the project list, so it's, right, it would be good to, yes, go through and weigh all of the other options and how long that might be off. Because we had talked about it at Hamburg Park also, and that's in the overall concept plan for the Hamburg Park, but the rate at which they're developing versus our financials, like that's a much larger,
It's longer.
yeah, longer term, larger investment in the future.
I would support the engineering cost in 25 for that.
The other question I had was about grant funding. So this doesn't include any grant funding, but having some kind of plan like this in place, plus like bike and pedestrian plan, plus vehicle plan, like if we wanted to do more sustainable vehicle purchase, any type of grant funding, if we have a plan like this approved, could.
Yeah, and I think part of this, like North Lawn Pond, for example, right now you're seeing a full $1.6 million debt. We engaged Strand in 22 to start an application for some construction cost on that. So we likely will see the cost of that go down. But again, until we have something signed on the dotted line, I'm hesitant to show you any net costs. Similar to any, like Dane County is very good at providing PED funding. What's good though is that this is maybe some of these PED improvements are on the horizon. You know, PED, the bike path construction and reconstruction all scored really well. So inclusion in the plan could give JJ and Kyla maybe a base to say, hey, these are projects we want to do. What other funding are there available? Again, we score very poorly because of our income level, average income level in the village. Basically any general grants are, unless it's like through the county, we're just not ever gonna get unless things drastically change.
Other questions, comments from board members?
So was there any movement of any projects up or back based on rankings?
Nope. So what I did is I eliminated projects, and so because I don't have clear direction, or at that time I didn't have clear direction from the board on to move projects different years. That's the discussion right now. I would hope that if something was moved off or taken off, we would have that discussion, either get it added back in, taken off. Was there a question specific?
Well, yeah, I'm just like looking at like the Alley Street reconstruction, which is a 2.43, cost 500 grand, and that's in 2026. And BBN intersection improvements, 400 grand, 1.86, and that's not till 28.
And I'll probably somewhat pass this over to JJ. There's utility components to some of these items, and I think, JJ, we had talked about, I'll pass it to you.
Generally speaking, Ollie Street is primarily sewer and water driven, but digging those up with the condition of that road made sense to consider the street project. A little more urgent with the sewer in particular. And BB&N, just the thinking by staff, again, all yours, but makes sense to maybe time that with whatever may happen at the intersection with the properties that the village has acquired. So that didn't seem, although it scored well, maybe aligning that with whatever else may happen made sense. But
I mean, I get that. I mean, part of me is maybe biased because I hate that intersection, but I don't know. It just seems like, besides removing some of the lower scoring things, I don't really get the point of ranking these if it's not going to be like a ranking cost analysis to move things around. I don't know.
Yeah,
Seems like what it should be.
some of that though, and it's hard to provide context. Given that it's a full 10-year plan, it doesn't always make sense to do a specific project, let's say even on the first half of this plan, but it makes sense to do it on the second half. Additionally, the Utility Commission kind of makes all the decisions, as I'm sure you're aware, for the utility projects. So trying to marry them up as much as possible. So a lot of the times, you know, and again, the one, JJ and I actually had a lot of talk specifically about the other public works, the BB&N intersection improvement in 2028. You know, I just said, well, you know, just curious, what, you know, how can we move this up? Does it make sense? And again, that's why we have this kind of workshop tonight. So the reason being for that one is there's gonna probably be significant changes to what that intersection and even area of town may look like, depending on what's being done in TID 9. So we could either do it or make improvements now and then potentially redo it or kind of wait. So the kind of thought was, let's let that settle a little bit, but certainly can and open to hearing suggestions for moving things around.
I guess along with, like, to Chris's point, I was expecting a plan where you took all of our rankings into consideration and rearranged the plan according to the rankings. Because right now, yeah, it's the same thing we've already seen. So, I mean, do you go line by line and discuss every single thing? Because, or do like the A's get their preferred year? And then do the B's maybe get their preferred, like, I just don't I don't understand the flow.
Yeah, and again, taking out kind of the methodology here, taking out the low scoring projects, this is what's in the plan, and now the board's decisions to move it whatever years. So this is just, because we have to give you a first draft of this, this is just how it rolled out. Because it would, if something was recommended in 2033 and I put it in 2026 by department, that might not necessarily make sense. So you just need just the additional context.
I guess I also didn't know going into this that like the 3.14 is the cutoff, or does that change year to year?
Again, to stay within the parameters, that's just how it rolled off. So there's 2 projects that got cut with the 3.14. I got within the parameters.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's not, I just didn't know that going
Yeah.
into the process.
And so that, you know, as you guys are aware, 23 projects were submitted last year. So I didn't run the numbers at what that cutoff would have been, but that number, depending on projects submitted, could drastically change year to year.
And I guess I'll just harp on what I said last time too. I think that the way that the criteria are outlined makes it really difficult for me to then also think about, well, if I want to move something up, I should actually go against the criteria. So, yeah, I don't know. I have a problem, obviously have a problem with that, which hopefully we can address next year.
And yeah, I mean, I'm good with like rearranging these things. I don't know if we can do it on the fly tonight, though. I don't know if we have the time or the capacity to do that. And I don't know if I'm super comfortable approving a plan that we're gonna then go and adjust a little bit.
Remember, this is just the first step. This has to go to Budget Review Committee. We have a workshop that we'll sit through formally, spend quality time together and bonding, talking about all that stuff. That's when I think the shifting around stuff might happen.
Right.
To make things.
My only worry with that, and it might be unfounded, is that if I don't say anything now and I get to the Budget Review Committee and then somebody says, well, you should have brought this up before. So I just wanted to get that out now.
I mean, board members can we suggest things that are out of there right now back in there too as well. It's just a process. I said that, I think, the last time we met too. We have to do something, because when we don't get this sorted out, we don't get grants and we get dinged from the rating agencies. So we have to do this. And it's hard because there are a lot of wants out there, those, that community members would like to see, but there's only so many dollars to stretch. So
Yeah, I'm not suggesting we don't do it. I know we gotta do it. I just would like to see a more concrete idea, if not finalized, more concrete idea of years for these different things. Because, I mean, we've already gone through it saying some of these things are dropping out. But, I mean, if something's gonna get moved around, I guess I'd just like to see that before I sign off
Yeah,
on it.
and then part of that is there's why one change from last year was providing, if we'd move something within the plan, you got a dollar amount here. So kind of in this workshop, it's fairly easy for me to either add stuff, move things around, and ultimately kind of show you guys. Any action that's not taken tonight will push back the budget timeline. I want to make that very clear. So just a thought.
It was in the attachment. It's page 26. So page 26 kind of shows a summary, highlighting out the project that didn't make the cut. Then as far as moving things around, that's still on the table, but we're still within the total dollars over the 10 years, Cameron, correct? Correct. So that page 26 really summarizes the ones that made the cut. And again, Cindy, I don't disagree with you in terms of next year we can change how we prioritize, but certainly we got to at least get the aggregate plan over the 10-year period to kind of fit within the guidelines that Cameron has outlined for us. And that's what's on 26. And again, they don't line up exactly 2 million a year, but the plan kind of holds water within the context of the total,
Minus 2026,
minus 2026.
right?
Again,
But
it's
that's-
again,
Go ahead.
we're talking about averages here, and so when we're talking about the 2 million per year, so we took the 60 million for the 10-year plan. We knew we had a large project at 20 million, so then that took us $40 million bucket. And then we have 20 million that has to be used in the plan for roads and vehicles. So then $20 million in this, again, on average for 25 through 2034. So when you take the police station out, you actually get a plan that averages within the guidelines.
You can't really take the police station out though, can you? I mean, it's money it's a project that's been approved by the board.
What was that?
You can't really take it out of the average because it's been approved by the board though.
But then the parameters would have been the $4 million for major projects instead of 2 million on average.
Okay.
So because it was a project that has kind of, while it's not been approved by the board, again, the construction contract has not been approved, and the scope and discussion is still having, it was kind of a known factor that if I would have said, yeah, spend $4 to $6 million, but then kind of told you at the tail end, oh, by the way, that also includes this project, that would have been kind of difficult.
I'm wondering from the staff's perspective is how this is laid out as far as timeline. If it's what was presented, it seems like it would still work. Like there's nothing alarming from a staff perspective on what years these are bucketed for.
I think you're gonna get a tax impact that's higher than I would recommend approving. I'm being completely honest. When you get the plan back at the FMP, I maybe cut another $10 million worth of project, $7 million worth of project. It is, right now, again, we started with the basis that this is, again, what the guidelines say, but ultimately, if we're gonna cause a $700 year increase in taxes year over year for a couple of years, that's not sustainable. So that's the component that's missing to this. Even if it is in the guidelines, doesn't necessarily mean I would recommend passing that plan once we get to the FMP.
I mean, I guess I want to see the library put in 2034, but you're also missing a couple other big projects within the plan, right? It's like your police station phase 2 isn't in this 10-year plan and potentially could be out in 2034. The justification for building a standalone police station included the fact that we don't have enough space for all the rest of the staff, and MSB is not, I'm assuming there's gonna have to be renovation, and that's not in here either. And those are two other enormous capital projects that are going to completely change this plan.
Yes, again, we wouldn't approve phase 2 until the population dictates that. So until it's been studied and a recommended year is applied, it probably doesn't make sense to place it there. Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, though, even if we have to vacate MSB and there's not money available to reconfigure, we're just gonna make it work. Yes, there's dollars that probably need to be put to it, but if we have to make do with what we have, we have to make do with what we have. If that makes sense.
You do have general, like, building maintenance, like, in the regular budget. Is that kind of what was used just for, like, over here?
Yeah, and I think it's important to note that place is not gonna be filled overnight. It's gonna be gradually, as growth happens, reconfigured and, again, studied to see, well, what makes the most sense with what our current operations. What ultimately doesn't show in the plan directly is Bonnie Road. While we put some Band-Aids on from a roof perspective, the new police station is gonna provide some police station equipment out of that garage, and other equipment can now be fully utilized by Public Works. So again, there's a cost of not doing it, because we would have to be putting more money in Bonnie Road or an alternative facility for parking.
And to Cindy's point, I mean, I would love to put the library in 2034 also, but I just, after going through the FMP, so many, like, I don't know how I could do that after looking at those other years and looking at the tax impact, like the full project. I mean, I would love to put it back in, but after looking at, you know, all these projects in front of us, I just,
It seems like if we're already potentially gonna have to cut more programs out of this to get to a comfortable tax increase, I just don't know how we could add in that many millions of dollars into this 10-year plan. And so does it also behoove us to give you an idea of if there are some things in here we would take out, so that when the financial management plan is done, we're not sending folks back to the drawing board? You know, what if we know this is already going to probably be too high? Should we suggest also running the numbers if we were to take out, for example, anything over 2.5? What would that look like? Or would that direction be helpful, or is it best to wait to see how this shakes out?
Sarah, I think one thing that would be helpful is just knowing what is the board's general comfort level on a year-to-year basis for a tax impact. And we work backwards from that within this framework.
What does this plan represent in terms of tax impact?
Hasn't been evaluated yet.
Any orders of magnitude
High level, police station, $330 for the average home.
for the average home? Per year for 10 years?
20.
So it's 20 years.
Yeah.
You're probably looking for everything else an additional 100 to 150 at least.
So net $500 a year after the police station is built for the average home in Cottage Grove, based on this plan right now.
But not including operational costs of the new building.
For the police station? So you're gonna see a subsequent decrease for the current space, because you're not gonna have electricity, water, sewer. So I think that's one thing to keep in mind. At a high level, when we were looking and estimating the cost originally, we were like, okay, let's just throw a really high number in the survey. We were thinking that number is actually gonna be closer to $85,000 to operate that facility. I guess the question would be, I guess general direction I've gotten from the board in the past, it's make public safety work. So that would be, you know, maybe asking, you know, maybe we don't hire, you know, if the general plan is 2 police officers a year, maybe it's a year we don't hire one. That's about $100,000 after benefits. That covers the increased cost in operating, and then we kind of keep rolling forward as planned. There's not a ton of.
Do you have that plan?
What was
Do you
that?
have like staffing plans for the next 10 years, estimates? Because we know how the population is projected to grow.
Sure.
The financial model has 2 officers per year in there already.
Yeah, as a conservative estimate, yep. So again, wanting to make sure that we kind of plan for the moderate to moderate worse scenario in the plan, just to make sure we're covering our capacity.
so in the planning of this facility, we can reduce operating costs by investing in, you know, I don't know, geothermal, solar, all sorts of things that you can, are those, I guess, since we haven't really been in the full design of the building yet, because that's next year, that's something that we can analyze, the cost savings of operations along with the initial investment.
Yeah, I guess where I kind of get tripped up a little bit is as departments grow, they incrementally increase their operating costs. So you have a small bump here for the PD primarily in property insurance. And then again, you know, electric, gas. But just because we have a space doesn't mean we're gonna fill it with as many officers as we can. So you're gonna be almost moving into a facility that's more efficient than the current facility. So you're gonna already see decrease, but again, it's 2.3 times the size of that current space. So we were very conservative with that 85,000 that, given there's no extra efficiencies, this is about what we would see.
Any other discussion?
I feel like we didn't give it very helpful.
No, I think what we,
Feedback.
I think what we need to do is see the all-in, similar we do in prior years, and then we have to, allow the process to play out, and we're gonna have to cut.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the homework, I think, for everybody, is to start thinking about what that is. And it's probably gonna be about 10 million over 10 years.
I guess that's why I was wondering, does it make sense to kind of give a suggested pre-cut, if you will, of, so that we could see two plans at the same time instead of having to send them back and we have to keep doing it back and forth? Like, would we suggest, what would a financial management plan look like if we didn't include anything at 2.5 and above at the same time as looking at the all-in?
Well, staff certainly would appreciate that, if somebody's ready to start looking at those things.
Isn't that also the point of the prioritization process? So we're using 3.14 as a cutoff. If we have to cut an additional whatever out, that goes up to, everything under or over 2 is now cut because we can't afford it. And we're doing the A's and the B's first.
Yeah, as a first pass, I think that's
Right.
true.
Would that help, Cameron?
Yeah, I guess we want to be careful because I don't decide projects. So if I get if I don't get a tax impact and I get an arbitrarily A and B projects, there's ultimately going to be fringe projects that are, again, like there was 4 3.14. So then that puts me in a situation where I'm picking some projects and not other projects. So I would prefer a much more, these are the projects we want initially included. I think you'd be shocked to see if we just included the ladder truck, the police station, and the projects for 25, and then maybe some of these ADA projects. That's already gonna be an increase. That's 5 projects in a 10-year plan. If it was me doing this, that's all I would have in the plan. And I'm just being brutally honest. But again, there's things that need to be done. So like the ADA improvements, is that worth the tax impact? I believe, for most people in here, that the answer would be yes. Are some of these PED plans, PED things, you kind of get into, is it a need or a want?
Yep.
So those aren't big value projects, but every dollar counts.
Yep.
I think, Cameron, if you can show us that in addition to the all-in, that would be helpful. What you just suggested, the police,
Like a bare
ADA,
bones.
yeah.
Okay.
I find that helpful with others.
Yeah.
And I guess going from bare bones, my next step is the intersection improvements and the safety improvements. 'Cause if you do that type of work, you're ultimately potentially maybe cutting down on police time at certain intersections or traffic collisions or, other public safety issues. And then I have to always go back to what residents want and expect in a community too. I mean,
I'm not quite sure how to put this. But something that Cameron said has just been kind of irritating me. When he said with the MSB thing, if we have to make do with what we have, we have to make do. And I feel like we're asking that of every department in the village except the one. I don't understand why every department, we tell them, make do with what we have, and then we say, here's $23 million for a police station. We keep talking about, we have to cut this, we have to cut this, we have to cut $10 million, and the $23 million to the police station doesn't seem to be an option to cut back on, and I guess I don't really understand that.
Yeah, from my perspective, we kind of start with the essential when we're putting the budget together, it's essential services down. So that's why I kind of mentioned, you know, if we have to make do kind of at the administration side, the public works side, we start with the kind of the highest level of critical essential services down to the other services. And again, we're talking.
I would just say at the end of the day, it all comes down to direction. If you guys don't want it presented that way, just tell us.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we have to have everything on the table. I don't think there's anything that can be off the table. I mean, I'm guessing I'm in the minority here and it's gonna stay as it is, but I think we should be able to have a discussion on everything.
So what are you asking for, Chris?
What I'm asking for is just to, I guess, have options of, I know we've already cut back on what the police station project was originally proposed on, but, I mean, there's like a workout station in the police there's a workout area in the police station, and as I recall, I asked Chief about that, and he said that wouldn't be used during hours, it would be before or after. I don't understand why they would get a private workout area. Maybe there's a reason, I don't know, but I'm just saying there's areas where I think we can still cut on it.
Most of the equipment was donated. I think all of it, actually, I believe. And we require, yeah, and we require officers to be in shape. That's why it's there.
Yeah, I want to be in shape, but I don't get a free workout area. And I understand the equipment is donated, but that's another room. That could be offices instead.
Offices cost money.
Square footage costs money.
Yeah.
No matter what the square footage is, there's a cost associated with it.
I think for tonight's conversation, because Edinburgh is still in the design phase and we're still talking about scope, that's probably not a good discussion for tonight. Given that, you know, we'll get kind of this is what the cost is now after design and architecture. And if we need to modify it and reduce scope, we can do that. Unless I'm in the minority there.
No, you're not.
I mean, to Chris's point, that for the cost of the police station, you could do 25 projects on the list, equivalent projects, if you were to put it all in. So, I mean, there is a lot to consider. That takes up the capacity for the village to do anything else for a long time. And I mean, I still really feel like this needs to be, if we're doing a bare bones, I need to see 15 years out with a second phase in there so we can show people that nothing else is going in for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, as staff, we're gonna do what's directed from the village board. First attempt on this. Ultimately, you know, if you guys don't want it included in there or you want to see a reduced cost in there, you do have to look at it from our perspective. It's a known need. The longer we wait to do that project, the more expensive it gets. So if it's cut, there needs to be an expectation that the service levels will continue to decline because we do not have the proper space to provide those services. So as a department's recommending this, this is what's recommended to continue to provide the current service levels. And so, you know, if it was, you know, up to chief, you know, we would include that extra 16,200 square feet. And it was really taken seriously, every square foot that was cut. And so we'll see what the final numbers are, and then ultimately do whatever direction we have.
So the whole police station project development happened before I was on the board, and I guess I've kind of followed it a little bit, but I know the scope has been cut, and I don't know, and I agree it's a big spend, and it's projecting support in the future. Public safety is very important. The question is, have we looked at a modular approach where we build what we need for the next 5 years and then we can add on, or I don't know. And maybe this conversation is for a review. I just hate to have the engineering get to the point where we spend a lot of money on engineering and then we're kind of having this kind of conversation unless, you know, the general feeling is that's already been done. We're on a bare bones facility in terms of square footage.
I think that that's what this is. I think this is the modular approach,
Yes,
and
totally.
this is scaled down to what we would need to survive 5 years ago, almost. It feels like we're actually trying to catch up.
Okay.
The building wasn't a police station to start with.
It wasn't.
So,
We really didn't have a police station.
right, we had to put it together in months, I think, is my
Yeah.
recollection of it. So I think we've already done that whole analysis of what can we afford, do we need it, do we not, is there needs? Yes, it's a lot of money. Feels like what we need to be able to offer a police department of the service level.
When you go back to the FGM report from December, it said, like, its final conclusion was to build a standalone police station, but that was also then to make the municipal services building, like the new village hall, right? And that's still not in the bare bones plan, but I'm assuming that it needs to be.
No, that
No.
wasn't the
No.
plan. We didn't have the funds to go forward. So
No.
the plan, what was recommended was a standalone police station. And then in the timeline that they gave, it was consider other MSB improvements, as needed. So that only thing that was recommended was the standalone police station.
Would it be appropriate to have the chief to kind of share some feedback? I know from a financial component, but maybe from a services component?
So from a services component, obviously, the current layout has functioned well as it was designed to last 10 years for the space. But from functionality, it is not efficient. It also impacts some other matters that I'm not going to bring up at a public meeting, but I've discussed with other personnel, trustees, related to some of the concerns I have with the current facility and its layout. And I'm happy to discuss one-on-one at any time, and as I've extended before, you're welcome. We'll sit down and I'll give you a tour of the facilities and go over everything and discuss the matters with you.
I think just some extra background too, just building on Sarah's. We did do, it's been a long process, basically since I was first elected, almost 6 years ago, looking at the facilities and knowing that we had outgrown some things when we got there. So continuing to delay, will just put us further back. Mm-hmm.
But it's gonna be a higher cost. I mean, we can use that rationale for anything on this list. That every year we delay something, it's gonna cost more.
Yeah, I think this is a really hard process because we don't have enough money to do everything that we need to do. And so I think this is gonna be difficult. But thank you. No, I was gonna say thanks to Cameron for trying to put some forward to us and taking our feedback and being willing to come back with another round.
Yes, I agree. Thank you, Cameron and staff, and for putting all the explanations together. I think that definitely helped in the process. And also looking into our crystal ball 10 years. 10 years ago, we wouldn't have thought we are where we are now. So, some things, if they get cut, may be able to be added in the future. We don't know what's going to happen in 10 years, and it's quite a ways off.
Have we talked about all the specific ones that we should talk about? That there were some where, so I thought it was helpful, having that 6-point scale or whatever, it's helpful to look at the spread too, to see like where the board maybe disagrees in some of the issues. I just want to make sure that we hit all of those ones where there were a discrepancy.
Which one do you want to cover?
I have I know that, the police, the park. Community.
Community park?
Yep, that was, I mean, I was just looking at the spread of points within like all of our scores.
One note that I just want to put in here, it was a project that was cut not because of what it was or how it graded. Deer Grove submitted, so last year I started discussions with Chief Lang. I just be like, we're growing. We know we're growing. What are the need? Like, I haven't seen anything submitted for 10 years for Deer Grove EMS, and similar fire. So that kind of kicked off a discussion that made its way to both fire and EMS. Ultimately, in 2028, they're going to throw some dollars at, or at least recommend some dollars at some facility studying. They gave a range of 2 to 4 million in their plan for improvements. The reason why it was not included in the plan, and again, that's something, a perfect example why we do this every year. Once that gets refined and a better scope and a why that project should be in there, that's when that's when I would expect that to potentially round up. Like, again, this is that 3.14 mark. And again, I think it's very, I think, aggressive to believe a project could be studied in 28 and completed in 29. So again, working with that partnership with Deer Grove and Fire and making sure we fully understand what's going to be needed here in the future.
I thought they had allocated, it was 50,000, I think, for studying it in 27, but then I thought they had pushed it out.
Okay. Yeah, I thought the last thing I looked at is it was 28 and 20, like back-to-back years.
Yeah, and I thought that got changed. But maybe not.
I'll have to look at it. And I think the state's gonna have to step in on fire at some point in time. The 2% dues and funding mechanism is not working. And a lot of departments are failing because there's just not funding and the volunteer model's disintegrating. We have wonderful volunteers, and it has been a volunteer service, and very appreciative of all their time and effort, similar with the casual EMS folks. But again, if that model for some reason would fail or not be able to keep up with capacity, that's also a different design of what that building could look like. And again, it was hard with this specific plan because it's like, okay, are we talking about strategically, does it make sense to build a satellite station? Does it make sense to do a renovation? None of those questions could be answered in this plan, which again, not excluded because it's not a service we don't value. Just need a little bit more information, a little bit better time, calls for service, when the next ambulance is gonna come online. So still working very closely with Chief Lang on that.
One project I just want to put a plug in for, I'm the only one that put this as an A, and it's probably because my kids are going to go to the school next year, but the Damascus Trail improvement, BB to Killian, I think that would be very helpful to do sooner than 2029, to just help all the kids that are going to GRS and GDS. I'd like to see that done soon. Thanks.
I think the other ones that had a larger spread, so community park improvements with the shelter, library, police station, Fireman's Park concession stand, although the spread was like 3 to 6, so it was on like the low end. The bike path extension, Southern Green to N, West Lawn Drive bike improvements, N and North Lawn intersection, Shady Grove. And maybe that's too mathematical for everyone. I was like standard deviation. Wanted to make sure that we just at least discussed maybe where we had disagreements.
So I think I heard Shady Grove Park in the mix, right? Is that one that you mentioned? So there is park development fund, and actually a park development fund is pretty significant. I think it's at least above $500,000. It might even be more than that. That can help fund that project. Is that kind of And a lot of it is, well, some of it has to be used in Shady Grove, right?
Yeah, about a quarter to a half of the resources required for that are currently Shady Grove, or impact or park fees collected. And we will continue to collect those to reduce debt service cost in the future. And that's why it was included, because we know we have to do this park. This is the cheapest time we can do this park.
And the scope of the park could be changed to fit within however much money that we have in the park development fund that has to be, like, if we had to cut, like, whatever if we had to build a playground at a certain amount, we could fit within using park development fund only for that.
Yeah, that's what was presented as a complete park, so we could do it in phases if that's what the board chose.
So then it wouldn't come off of any debt issuance at all, I guess. That's-
I think we should see how the two different drafts come back and then dive into if we want to add some back in or take some out, then have the conversation about which ones, because they might be ranked differently if, like, we're just going to look at intersections, or bike ped paths might rank them differently. So let's maybe see how these numbers shake out and then have those discussions.
So the direction I have is three different. The first one's the bare bones, the second one's with the intersection improvements, and then the third is kind of as is, or at least what has been discussed so far. Are there only a desire to see two options, or those?
What are the intersection improvements you're talking about?
Cynthia just mentioned she'd like to see the intersection improvements included, primarily for like the, again, covering safety component and
okay.
PED.
Sure. That's-
Most of them made the cut.
Right, the town is another where maybe we disagreed a little bit as a board, connecting town and village streets.
That's up to the town.
I mean, that's a harder discussion, right?
It's a discussion we'd have to have with the town, and the town is not willing to have that discussion, because we've tried that over the last 10 years I've been on this board, and it's a no-go, and I know it was prior to that as a no-go, so I don't know how you fix that or address it.
If it's no go, then why don't we just remove it?
Yeah, I think what's included in the plan is not connecting the streets
It's
with
just bike
streets,
path.
it's just paths.
Oh,
So I think that was kind of like a compromise. I don't know, JJ, you had some more notes on that.
No, it still may be a no-go, but
Yeah.
I think it's a lot more feasible to have that conversation.
But isn't the concern of the town the traffic?
Yeah.
You know, you've got these cul-de-sacs essentially that they don't want, you know, the incremental traffic. But you think they would have a problem with pedestrians and bikes, JJ? It's the town, okay.
I don't want to say until I go to have the conversation.
Okay.
Peter, I think it's twofold. It's the traffic, but they also want to see the village basically pay to fix their roads.
Yeah.
As well.
However, I see a real opportunity, for example, on Morning Dove Drive, where we already have a bike path running down to Old Morning Dove Drive, and it would be a very nice connection to make, and our snowplow could just go right through to their street. It's an opportunity where we may be able to come together with the town to help get kids between neighborhoods to schools safely without having to trip over tree roots growing up in the little path they've made over the years going between the two neighborhoods and the schools up the street. So I think that's one opportunity where maybe we could collaborate, but I don't know what the likelihood is. Might be slim.
I can reach out to Chairman Hampton and ask.
I think if we're starting to fit things back into, and I think I had emailed, but I'm not sure I got a response about the bike plan and the order of operations, and I didn't know if there was an order where one thing has to be done before the next, or kind of how that all fit. So if we do start adding things back in, if there's justification, at least in terms of like the bike pedestrian paths of this first, this second.
We could talk about it at the Public Works Committee. We kind of did when we did an overall holistic view of the connections. I don't know that there's necessarily any order it has to happen in, except for the one caveat would be basically the urbanization of N that's in there at a big dollar amount. If there's any intersection improvements from here north on N, that should be looked at holistically, because if you did the whole thing, you want to just make sure that those intersection improvements are a piece of that. If that project was somehow fit in, or if you're piecemealing certain intersections, whether it's North Lawn, make sure you have an idea of what the whole urbanization is going to look like, so you're not redoing that. But otherwise, I think they can all be prioritized however the board sees fit.
Anybody got a motion yet? Yes, we do. So that staff has direction.
Okay, I'll do my best at trying one. I'll make a motion that the staff put together a financial management plan that has what we're calling the bare bones, which would be the police station and the ADA facilities. And did I miss?
Ladder truck.
Ladder truck. Second one would be the all-in, the way that the scores was presented tonight. And the third one would be the bare bones plus the intersection safety projects.
That sounds reasonable. Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second then. Any other discussion?
Yep, just between now and budget review, I know we talked a lot about what years were what. Please reach out to staff. Let's have the conversation leading up to budget review so I can get as much, information to Greg as possible as far as maybe moving around projects and what that would be. We'll show the plan with the motion as is, but again, the more information I have ahead of time to be armed with, the easier it is to make those changes. And that way, after budget review committee, you guys can get, and discussion can happen at budget review, you guys can get the most clean version possible of the FMP at village board. So we have that meeting to kind of refine and really clean that.
And thank you, Cameron, for all of this work, everyone. And just for next year too, I think justification, it's leaps and bounds better than like what I've seen in the last handful of years. But again, like having a justification of one-liner of why this year was selected would also be helpful when we're starting to look at things.
Maybe Cameron, in the survey, if we could have a spot, and maybe the board member just puts it in the comments, but I think slotting them in a certain year is, a department head or department may have a recommended year, and then if that's scored as an A or B, the assumption may be you like it in that year, but if you want to score it as an A and then have a qualifier in the comments that I would also recommend moving it up, maybe that would help inform movement more within it.
And public involvement perspective too, I've been kicking around the idea that maybe a couple meetings leading up to this, Public Works presents at one meeting, allows there to be back and forth, but more importantly, inviting community to speak on certain projects. Then the next meeting we do parks and whatever. And that way departments have an opportunity to present these projects prior to voting. Again, really trying to produce the best result possible, and appreciate the flexibility on this. And we're getting into the fun time of year.
And Chris, one more comment I just thought of regarding the police prioritization. I think that just from a pure staffing standpoint in space, it's not necessarily trying to favor one. Well, for one, we're getting feedback from each board member, so that informs us, but also they were just a department that was clearly growing the fastest and going to likely continue to grow the fastest. And their space was specifically designed for a relatively educated guess on a time frame that they were running out of. So just that's the additional context to that.
All right, any other discussion?
I'll just mention that there were several library emails from village residents that came in over the last couple of days, I think. So just wanted to acknowledge receipt of those.
Yep, I was going to mention that during correspondence, but thank you. All right, with that, then, all those in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? Anybody abstain? Motion carries. All right. Moving then to new business, interviews with the assessment services. We have Accurate here, right? Yeah. So we'll turn it over to you. Just push the little button that's got the voice thing, and you get a red.
It's okay
Yeah.
if I sit here? I don't have to stand?
No, you can sit, stand, whatever you want to do,
All
but
right.
that way
For-
people
for-
on Zoom can hear you.
For those who are attending virtually, this is not, we had Associated Appraisal first on the agenda, followed second by Accurate. As kind of communicated in email, Associated did not send a rep tonight to present. And I'll highlight some of the things later. All you.
All right, in the spirit of time, I'd like to just make this a conversation versus me presenting. So if you have any questions at any point, just throw them at me. I'll kind of touch on the highlights of who we are and maybe how we differ from other assessment firms in the state. And that'll kind of get us through. My name's Scott McFarland. I've been with Accurate Appraisal since 2016. My background is paper science. I went to Stevens Point as an engineer, and I worked in the paper industry for 14 years. My I guess, sole purpose there was to reduce costs, try to become more efficient, all in the operation of making paper. Super exciting stuff. So I came on board in 2016. That's where my story starts with Accurate. That company started in 2001. 2 employees from Associated left in 2000 to start Accurate. They believed in 2 things. The assessment world can become way more efficient, and it was a better process. And also to be more transparent with the assessment process with the public, because back in the day, and some assessors still do this, assessing is kind of a black box where it's like, here's your values, we're not going to let you know how we got there, and it's up to the resident to try to figure out how that happened, and that's very frustrating, right? So they set off in 2001 to start Accurate with the goal of educating the public, and we've continued that process for the 24 years we've been in existence. We have 34 employees. All of our employees are assessors. We don't have entry-level positions. Most assessors have data entry people, and then they have field, and then they'll have assessors. All of our people are assessors, even the people that you'll call. We have 3 live assessors on staff, so when residents call, they're talking to an assessor. The majority of them are assessor 2s. We have 5 assessor 3s. We have 110 municipalities in the state, and we retain actually over 95% of them. A lot of them in Dane County. We have a big presence in Dane County and Milwaukee area. We have over 20 municipalities in Dane County. Technology, this is another area where we differentiate ourselves from the assessment community in Wisconsin. We have our own CAMA system. CAMA stands for Computer Assisted Mass Appraisal. Any assessor in the state is required to use a CAMA system. We developed ours in the early 2000s because we didn't like how the current models assessed. They didn't follow state law, market drive being one of them. So we created our own. It's called Prolorum. We've been using it for a number of years, and now we actually, this year, we're starting to sell it to other assessors in the state, because I don't know if you are aware, but Market Drive got purchased 3 or 4 years ago now, by an outside company, and they are basically killing Market Drive and trying to get them to go to their current system. So all the assessors in the state that used Market Drive are either using a dead system or having to move off of it. We own our own CAMA system. It's cloud-based. We're the first and only assessment firm to be digital in the field. So our field people are going out there with their laptops, and they're updating the assessment data real time at the property, versus all the other assessors in the state write it on paper, go back to the office, enter it in, and there's a whole host of issues that can happen for that. It's also way more efficient, reducing costs, things like that. Part of our technology, we've developed a permit portal. I've talked to Cameron about it a little bit. You guys use GEC, I believe. We work with them a lot. We are able to take their data and import it into our CAMA system without going to an outside vendor to do that. And we're trying to work with GEC right now to take it one step further where we can actually API into our system. So when somebody enters a permit and/or the inspector completes a permit, our system gets updated on that, so we are aware of that whole process. And it eliminates all the hassle of having to get permits from you guys and then having to enter them in and all that stuff. We also have a lot of online forms. So back, you guys remember personal property? You guys know what personal property is? That no longer is a thing. It got moved into real estate, but we were the first assessment firm in the state to actually make an online form where residents, when they get their personal property statement, they don't have to fill it out. They can go online, fill it out, and it goes right into our system. It eliminates that whole hassle of having to mail it back to us. We do the same thing for sales. So every sale that happens during the year, we have to send out sales questionnaires. They don't have to send those back to us. They can go online and fill it out. They do have the option to send it to us, but the vast majority of people go online and fill it out that way. Any questions on our technology? Or anything I've covered so far? I know you guys have been here a while, so I'm trying to go as fast as I can. You probably have stuff after this too, so I'll get out of your hair. I talked about education and being transparent as a core value. Part of that being our customer service. When a resident calls, they talk to an assessor. And we work on education, 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 because as you know, when there's a revaluation, people automatically think that their taxes are going up. Your municipality is probably going to go up 30+% in the next reval that you guys do. It might even be more than that. People think when they see that sticker shock of their assessment that their taxes also go up that much. We want to get in front of that and educate them way before that ever happens. So every year, even in the maintenance year, we are educating your residents. We're sending mailers to them. We're on social media, LinkedIn, Facebook. We have videos on our website, and this year was the first year for open book. If anybody wants to set up an open book with us, they have to go online or they call, and they have to go through an education process before they can even set up an appointment. That is frequently asked questions. So what we've done, we analyze everything, and we found that 80% of residents' questions can be answered in 5 questions. So we have a frequently asked questions thing right up front. Why are my taxes going up? Why did my assessment go up? What's an improvement? People don't understand what that means. It's a state term. So we have a frequently asked questions thing that they got to go through, and that answers 80% of their questions. And then the next step is a quick video on what it means to assess and how that relates to taxes. And then the next step is a simple form that they got to fill out. That gives the assessor all the data they need to actually be in front of the questions that they're going to ask. So instead of meeting the person and trying to figure out what's your question on the phone, they know what the question is up front, so that just it consolidates that. Sometimes we can answer those questions via email too. So all that is to try to educate and be transparent in the assessment process. Questions on that? Am I talking too fast? Okay, good. Assessing is so exciting. Some success stories that we have. City of Waukesha, they have their own assessment staff. They just recently reached out to us. They've been having a very hard time finding commercial assessors. The state across the board is having issues with that, appraisers and assessing. We actually have both. I don't know if you guys are aware, but Accurate has a sister company called Acrivis. We do real estate appraisals throughout the nation. We have 2 certified general appraisers on staff that are versed in any type of commercial property, all the way down to one time we had to value a slip on at a yacht club on Lake Michigan. I mean, they've seen the gamut of it. But anyways, Waukesha couldn't fill that position, so they asked us, hey, can we use you guys for commercial assessing as a mentor? And it's growing into us actually doing their field work. New Richmond, this is one where we're trying to be, New Richmond's very progressive. They actually, they have an app called Hello New Richmond or something like that, where they get notifications via text that say something like, hey, this road construction's happening this week. We use that to let them know that field work's coming, or your assessment notice is coming in the mail, or open book period, board period. We're trying to educate them in any way they can. So if you guys have an app, I don't know if you guys do, where you can reach out to your residents, we would like to be part of that, so we can actually push notifications out as well. And then Greenville is just an example of how we go above and beyond. One of our core values is we are family, and we believe that not just our employees are family, but our customers and our municipal people as well. Greenville was, what's the proper term? It's not annexing into it from a town to a village, it's incorporating from a town to a village. They were 3 months away from going to a village, and they hadn't told their residents yet that they were going to a village, other than if you attended a town hall. They just didn't even think of going out and telling people. And Chris Plowman, who I think you've met, at least virtually, he's our media guy, marketing guy. He's always thinking, how can I make myself more valuable? He reached out to them and said, hey, my dad lives in Greenville, and he hasn't heard that you guys are going to a village. So what have you guys done? I'm like, we haven't done anything. We created a Facebook page, a LinkedIn page, and sent out mailers for them. Had nothing to do with assessing, and we did it completely free of charge because we value that relationship, and we want to make ourselves so valuable to you guys that you never want to get rid of us. So, in a nutshell, that's accurate. Any questions, comments? What do you want to know?
Thanks, Scott. Any questions from the board members?
Yeah, just had a quick question on your technology. So it's, not that this is a big deal, but so you have an API that connects what to the county as far as getting sales data, permits, this side of information? Or what do you mean by that?
So we have an API that could connect to a number of different software programs. The way we get sales is through the PAD from the state. And then we can get ownership data from the county. We don't do that via API because every county works differently, so we'd have to have 70-some different APIs. The API I was talking about was your GEC software that they use for inspections, right? They enter either online permits or hand-entered permits into that. We would be able to API into the GEC software to get that information. We work with Safe Built, they're another one just like GEC, OpenGov, if you've heard of them. We try to get into any system that you guys have, we will try to API into it to get the data that we need. And we can also API out. So the city of Kenosha, their finance program, whatever it is that they use, we API stuff into there so that way we don't have to export and then they import. It just free flows to it. So our CAMA system being, it's Microsoft based, it's built off of Microsoft Dynamics. It's very, very versatile when it comes to API-ing into, are you a technology guy? Because I'm not, so I'm gonna use terms that probably aren't even real. But yeah, we can API into a whole bunch of other things.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that. So I guess the only other question I had was, so would there be a Cottage Grove Assessor's webpage? I mean, would this be something that residents can go on, or do they got to go to your website and then search for the Village of Cottage Grove to be able to drill down to find any information they want?
So there's multiple ways we can do that. So let's say they want to see their property record card, their property data. We can put a link on your website that takes it right to that page, and then they just got to put in their parcel number or their address.
Or their address.
Yep. Or they can go to our website.
Okay.
Or we can actually put a link in your, what's the term? GIS. You guys probably have Esri. I don't know, maybe you know. But when you click on the parcel, a whole bunch of stuff comes up. We can have a link on there that they can actually go to our assessment
And
page. We've done
right now it's just county data, but okay.
Well, it's probably through Esri or through Schneider Geospatial. Those are the two predominant ones. But yes, there's a lot of different ways they can get their data. And it's free. We don't charge you to have your data, which we are the only assessment firm in the state that doesn't charge you to do that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Just out of curiosity, after a sales takes place, you send out a survey. If the person doesn't respond, do you reach out to them? Or?
We have to visit the property. So there's state laws that we got to follow, and the first step is send us, even if they do respond to the sales questionnaire, we still have to visit the property. We have to verify the data, verify that the sale was actually valid or not. And that first step is getting that questionnaire back. I would say we probably received less than 30%. When it was mailed, it was probably less than 10%. Since we've gone online, we received probably around 30. 70% of people just either don't open it or, I mean, how much mail do you guys actually open these days, right? There's not a lot. Mm-hmm.
Any other?
Definitely open the mail from my assessor, though.
I hope so. I hope so.
Don't throw that one away, Andre.
Any other questions for Scott? Okay. Thank you very much.
Well, good luck tonight.
Thank you. I'm gonna fill in as the associated appraisal. Just a history, because we do have 3 new board members who haven't directly met. Associated Appraisal has been the village's appraisal company or assessor company for 23 plus years. You know, I, as staff, view their board of review and open book process as very strong. There's certainly, I think, some communication stuff that could be better, but when we're talking about the critical assessment services, you know, they meet the standards that are required. So I'll go into contract language a little bit more in closed session. You know, why this was driven, why this is being brought in front of you at all. You know, when even 5 years ago with Associated, the village was still relatively small, and as we have significantly grown, there was a little bit of a sticker shock when I got the updated rates, which to the point why I felt that it was necessary to come to the board and say, let's have at least another conversation about what is out there and what we'll kind of doing our due diligence. Lisa is the one who primarily deals with permits, and that's a very critical piece to this process. You know, getting that data, you know, he had mentioned about API. The more you can automate that process, believe it or not, the less errors are going to be made. Not saying that errors never happen, but it's when you're talking about, you know, over 2,000 parcels and having to go through each individual parcel and review it, it is a really manual task, and it does, and we do catch things from time to time. 99% of those things get fixed before open book and board of review. So that's why we're here. That's it for me, John. Well, so far.
You're on a roll. All right, so we do have a closed session in regards to the assessor services. So probably just continue that conversation unless there's any comments from board members. So with that, next we have discuss and consider tree user agreement for MOU with Dane County. I'll turn this over to Lisa. It's sad we even have to talk about this. My point.
Yeah, thanks, John. There is a brief memo in the packet. Basically, what this is Dane County has an agreement with Optree, which will take personal information off of the internet of election officials to try and deter any swatting, anything that may happen with high-profile elections. So this is something that we can take advantage of just to kind of clear those things for temporary time.
Any questions for Lisa on this?
I'll make a motion that we approve the Optree user agreement MOU with Dane County as presented.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second then. Any other discussion? Having heard none, all those in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? Any abstain? Motion carries. Then we move to discuss and consider ordinance 082024, posting locations. Lisa again.
Do you want to take it, Larry, or do you want me to take it? Okay. So this is just a simple ordinance to change the policy or the procedure that we follow of posting in 4 locations to posting on the village website and village hall with some modifications if need be. I believe this is following state law, correct, Larry?
Any questions, comments from board members?
I'll make a motion to approve ordinance 082024 regarding posting locations.
I'll second.
We have a motion second then. Any other discussion? Having heard none, all those in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? Any abstain? Motion carries. comments? Then we move into reports from village boards, commissions, and committees, starting off with Pier Court. I've got that one. We met on July 16th, very brief meeting, but did cover some items. In particular, to highlight, Briar Patch shared that they had 10 youths that were referred to Briar Patch year-to-date. 4 of the youths have already closed out, meaning they've accomplished what they needed to accomplish of the 10, and 2 were referred in the last few days. So there's just a restorative justice, thing there. The other thing that was covered is just the Briar Patch wanted some updates to our website, just to make sure that there's a better description of the Pier Court, more current description of the Pier Court program. And so I reached out to JJ, and he is on it. So and that'll be covered again next time. Next meeting is planned for September 17th at 5 p.m. So any questions there?
John, one question. We do have professional services updates here coming in September. Do you want Briar Patch invited to give a presentation to the board on the services that they provide, similar to the other professional services?
I would leave that up to the board if you guys wanted to hear from them. We have in the past.
You have in the past? Okay.
We have heard them in the past, but again, new members to the board, so I would leave it up to the board members if you want to. Okay.
Thank you.
No, thank you. Next up, then, we have library board. Cindy?
Yep, so the library board met on Wednesday, July 17th, and we welcomed our new library board member and now Vice President JP. We continue to discuss, as we have the last 6 or 7 months, the strategic plan that we've been putting together. And we specifically looked at the SMART goals and kind of timeline, switching some of the goals around and some edits that have to be done. But I'm hoping to have a final-ish draft in the next couple of weeks, which I'll probably end up emailing out to all of you. I'm happy to take your feedback. It'll go to the facilities committee. It'll go to, the Friends exec has already looked at it. It'll go to the Friends membership and then out onto the community for additional ideas. And this is a 3-year strategic plan of what we plan to accomplish. We had a budget amendment, so it was just a mid-year reallocation of funding to better reflect actual budgeting and spending patterns. So no additional funding was requested or anything like that. It was just kind of a reorganization going into budget season so that there's a better representation in the plan. We approved a media policy edits that allow us to hide hate speech on social media, knowing that we're not going to delete anything, but it just gives us a little bit more control over those types of comments on our platforms. We reviewed the library-specific results from the village survey, and I came up with a list of recommendations, which again, if you're interested in, I can definitely email that out, but I thought it was a good exercise for us to go through the comments and the survey results and then come up with some goals moving forward for how we're going to improve our communication and some of the work that we're doing. We reorganized our facilities subcommittee a little bit with 2 additional ads, and then Tracy gave her programming report. So it's over this now, but around 56 out of 110 programs for the year with a little over 2,100 attendees to date. Tracy highlighted fall programming, which includes October Centennial programs, a lot of movement story times at Dolphin Swim Academy, a bunch of author talks, including the all community read for the fall, and an all 5th grade read that we are still waiting to hear if we received grant funding for. We approved vouchers. We're participating in Community Night Out, which is on August 21st. Again, we're waiting to hear about the grant, and we also discussed the Dane County Library tax rate, which went up around $50,000 from last year. So the village currently pays around a little over $320,000 for Dane County library tax. And that's on an annual basis. Exciting-ish news that we're going to take over the rest of the Friends programming that was kind of left over from when they started this a couple of years ago. So the library board will have control over the Earth Day celebration and the Zoo to You, which is the kickoff to summer reading. Our next meeting is facilities on Thursday, August 22nd at 6:30. So it's completely different time dates, same location. And then the whole library board will come again in September 18th and hopefully approve strategic plan and budget and all that. So that's it.
All right.
Questions?
Any questions for Cindy? Thanks, Cindy. Deer Grove EMS, I think this is Pete or Cindy. I don't know who.
Good, you did a very thorough job.
Sure. So Deer Grove EMS met on Thursday, July 18th. We approved meeting minutes from the previous meeting. We discussed the June financial reports, the bills for budgeted and approved expenses, the write-offs and aging of accounts with no major questions or discrepancies. We did talk slightly a bit about vehicle maintenance budget lines, and it's hopefully that's going to all be kept within budgets. We then had an overview of services provided by our billing contractor. So there's a transition from LifeQuest to EMS MC, and so if you've been following that throughout the year, that acquisition happened last year, and then there was the transition to the platform January 1st, and then ever since then, there's been kind of, a backlog of billing, and the 3 representatives came from the company and took all of our questions for quite some time. And it's trending better, so they are back up to about budget at this point, and caught up on the backlog, and they don't anticipate issues moving forward. And maybe Chief can hop in with anything that I didn't report on well with that.
No, Cindy, I think you did really well. The thing we identified was that our revenues were down, and we wanted answers as to why that was, to ensure that we're going to get to the number we thought we would. Why should a new company take over and have poorer performance than the old company was our biggest point.
Yeah, so they kind of just went over the process of how billing works, and then, their company, their policies, procedures, and how they're going to be doing a much better job moving forward. There were 89 calls in June and no missed calls. It's slightly down from last year. Volunteers provided 442 hours, which is up from the previous month. Again, Chief discussed the vehicle maintenance and the electrical issues that with one of the vehicles have seemed to be have been fixed. We're still waiting on a new bumper, so that tends to be reported at every meeting. There's been no correspondence, but obviously the Deer Grove continues to do quite a bit of public outreach and service at different events, and so we see them all over, which is great. We had a closed session item and reconvened into open session with no action. Our next commission date is Thursday, August 15th at the Deerfield Village Hall, beginning at 6:30.
All right. Any questions for Cindy? All right, thanks, Cindy. Next, then, we have Law Enforcement Committee. We met on July 23rd. Fairly brief meeting, did discuss new business. One item was regards to consideration of no parking at the end of Commerce Way, which is right at the end of where the planes land. So that's the end of the runway. So apparently there were a few cars that were parked there. So committee recommended that we do make no parking in the rounded area right closest to the runway. Chief walked through where we're at as far as the budget review for the first half of the year. We're overall in very good shape. Then dove into the reports. Nothing really to note there as far as anything out of the ordinary, which is always good. And in our next meeting, we'll start talking about budgets and talk about hopefully how the community night out went on 21st. Anything to add, Chief?
You covered it.
All right. Any questions All right, we'll move on then to Parks Rec. Heidi.
Yep, thank you. We met on July 25th, and we had a relatively brief meeting. We okayed Monona Grove Youth Soccer to build a storage shed at Bakken Park. They've been utilizing our storage space, and they'll be at their cost building their own storage shed at Bakken Park. We also talked about, I don't know if anyone's ever seen this in another community, it came up through one of the committee members, a rock snake where you put like kind of kindness rocks along a trail. So that's something we might, well, we're looking at starting next spring. So it kind of goes throughout the whole season at one of our parks. And then we talked about the donor tile board at Bakken Park. That was from when the original park was built there. And there was a lot of damage. The tiles were falling off. Some of them broke. So working on putting the tile wall back together. There were some that they couldn't be identified. So they're working to figure out what to do with these extra tiles, or if people want to design a new tile if theirs was one of the broken ones. That pretty much covered us, unless you have anything to add, Sean? All right. Our next meeting will be the 4th Thursday in August.
All right, any questions for Heidi? Thanks, Heidi. Then we'll move on to NADVIG. I think this is Sarah or Lorene. I don't know who wants to. All right, then we're going here.
It was a super quick meeting, less than 5 minutes, so we just reviewed the bills for monitoring for both the town and the village, and so we just looked at the bills, and I think this is a standard, for the testing happens on a regular basis, so we just looked at that, and that was it.
I think it's always good when those meetings are short, because then there's nothing to talk about. That's good. Then we'll move right to the fire district again. Maureen? Or Chris?
The minutes in the agenda are the wrong ones, so can you skip to the next thing? No, this is the last one on this. That's all right, give me a minute.
Okay.
I wasn't expecting to do this.
This is keeping you on your toes.
Is this a good time to remind everybody to vote next Tuesday?
It's a good time.
Vote next Tuesday. Primary, yeah, and a couple of referenda questions. July 29th. No? Yep. That was only last week. Oh my gosh, that feels like an eternity ago. Okay, we met on Monday, July 29th at 6:30. We discussed carbon monoxide monitoring in the apparatus bay. We talked about different lighting proposals in the ESB. I don't recall where we landed on that. Do you recall the lighting?
Yeah, it was the kind of the perimeter of the building, and then also in the basement with the LED lighting. So I know there was kind of some concerns about being visibility. So we kind of talked about could we work with that at this time, and then maybe at a later time for budget, put it on the next budget cycle. So.
Thank you. And then we discussed invoice to upgrade ESB wireless and internet network, and approve that. And then we got the chief's report, and that was it. We did discuss the festival update. They raised, I can't remember the exact number, but a good amount of money for the fire department. And we set our next meeting and adjourned. What a good job I did. Thanks, everybody.
On the fly. It's all right. Thanks, Chris. Then we move to reports from village officers. Larry, anything? Okay. Cameron, you're on a roll tonight. It's a Cameron night.
Yeah, I jokingly said this should just be renamed to Finance Committee tonight. So in your packet, I'm not going to go over all 69 pages of this. Please review. This is meant as a transparency document to kind of show the community where we are at budget to actual. Very solid performance for the general fund. The only thing I want to point out on kind of as a reminder on why reserves are so critical. This is the page that I'm showing is just a brief snip on what our intergovernmental aids are through June. As you can see, we've only received roughly 284,000 out of approximately 1 million. We receive we receive about 15% of our aid in July and the other 85% in November. In addition, for our taxes, we'll get another $2.2 or $2.3 million check from the county later this month. So we're talking about basically, you know, if you had no reserves, we would not be able to float these extended periods of not receiving any cash. So again, as the budget overall increases, I do have a high focus on our reserve numbers. As we get to a certain point in growth, maybe 20 and 30% isn't the number. Maybe we can scale back, or maybe there's a new specific target. But for right now, I would continue to recommend that should be our range for our budgeted reserves. I'll take a second and any questions on what's been presented to you.
I had a question on the miscellaneous revenue. So that paced ahead. What was the big driver of the $73,000 to year to date ahead?
Good question. So you have multiple different, in the last report, I gave both summary reports as well as, or just summary reports. This one I gave you summary reports and detailed. So if we take a look at this miscellaneous revenue line, and we go to the more detailed schedule, which is going to be what follows in this miscellaneous revenue, you'll see that our investment income is roughly 148,000 more than what's budgeted already. We'll continue to see that positive performance here for the rest. Well, tracking very closely the stock market taking a dump the last couple days. Also monitoring very closely if the Fed decides to have an emergency meeting on closing or cutting rates. That will have a significant impact on this number the rest of the year. Again, I know this might look like very conservative budgeting, but just 3 years ago, it was like $15,000 or $20,000 overall of investment income. So we don't want to miss this number. Additionally, for the 25 budget, if we budget 120,000 and we actually get 60, that already puts us at a hole. So just to keep in mind, there is a reason why we are more conservative on that figure. What that will allow us to do, or some potential buckets, we have a couple of projects or one-time projects that need to be done next year. There's a strategic plan, there's a revaluation that needs to be done. So there'll be a couple recommendations on what can be done if our reserve levels are significantly outpacing what they need to be. Good question, though. That's a number that makes me really happy right now.
Yeah, but I agree with you. We got to be conservative next year with what's going on in terms of rates.
And then we have one of the aids is tied to sales tax revenue. So they changed with Act 12 some of the supplemental aid. There is a potential, given the current forecast, that number could actually even be negative. It's like 0.04% increase compared to prior year, which means if things are downturning, we could actually see a reduction in aid, not an increase in aid. Right now, the FMP is going to call for a 2% increase in that aid. I will be monitoring things very closely over the next month and making a call on why we felt like we needed to back that number down. But things are tightening for sure in the finance markets.
So you're saying that the IGA is pretty much timing right now? You're not concerned about the overall number, even though it's that far behind?
Yep, because the state runs under a different fiscal year. So they give us a little bit in July, in the beginning of their fiscal year, they give us 18% or 15%. We actually know ahead of time what that number is going to be. The one that we won't know right away for until I believe they said they're going to release it late August or early September, is this shared revenue supplemental aid. So we've been stuck at our regular shared revenue at 46,000 for years. This additional aid was new aid for 24. This was supposed to be indexed as sales tax revenues increases. The municipalities were supposed to also see an increase. Subsequently, if they saw a decrease in aid or decrease in sales tax revenue, we could see a decrease in that aid. What I'm not sure about yet is if this is the base. So like in year one, if they say it won't go any less than this, but again, I don't know how that would impact the future years. So if we were supposed to get a 1% decrease and it's stuck at the base, in subsequent years there might be catch up. So again, monitoring that very closely. And all projects are at budget or under budget. No projects are a concern. I had talked to the board about potentially not being able to fit the camera system in the current financial constraints. A combination of other projects coming significantly less, as well as that vendor offering kind of their year-end discount, we were able to actually fit all those IT improvements for cameras in the current budget scope. So again, that differentiates a little bit from a couple meetings ago when we said we'll come back after the park. We were able to get the numbers to be less to fit in our current constraints. Where this eventually leads to, you'll also see a packet or a memo in the packet today about the hiring of a parks maintenance position. There was general discussion about this during the budget cycle last year. Again, we are experiencing very good, positive financial position. I believe we could accommodate this fourth quarter position under current financial constraints. So ultimately, if the board wants to move forward with this, I would recommend to reaffirm direction and hire the full-time parks maintenance position.
So that's a discuss and consider. So leading into this, so over the weekend, there was an issue with the splash pad, and it's taken care of, but there's an alarm that goes off when you don't have a body there to actually fix it or address it, then people got upset. So I know I got a couple calls that I couldn't take because I was driving. And ultimately it was dealt with, but this feeds right into that thing because we're pushing the staff at all levels, and particularly right now when we've added all these things, we don't have enough folks to be on all the time. So just a side note in regards to that particular position for consideration.
Just one comment for Cameron or question so you can kind of clarify, just not speaking about taking need out of it, but just financially, obviously we can afford this in the, quarter 3, 4 of this year, but what does this mean for an increase into the levy for next year, given we have about $100,000 to work with from a net new construction standpoint?
Yeah, so that was certainly figured into this, and definitely plays kind of as like overall, everything's got to fit in the grand scheme of things. So this would become a permanent position. There is going to be, and this is maybe news to Sean, there will be a subsequent slight decrease in the part-time parks budget. There's 86,000 right now that again is used to hire people to mow lawns and stuff. There'll be some type of compromise that, we got to make up the fund somewhere. While it's not going to completely come from there, a part of that's going to come from that bucket. In discussions with Inga earlier in this cycle, it is becoming very, very, very difficult to hire these seasonal workers. Our seasonal worker crew is amazing, and they come back. Most of them come back every year. And again, we've continued to increase square footage of parks and maintenance and splash pad. And we really only have one full-time position currently that's committed to that. I think Public Works and Parks does a great job working together, but this will help make sure that our parks are maintained at a high level.
Any questions, comments from board members?
So right now, you're talking about having fewer part-time people next year if we hire another full-time maintenance.
It's just one position we're talking about from year over, but when we're talking about, we have to fit everything within our budget constraints. It would be similar if I hire another staff, I would expect overtime to decrease. We're gonna less rely on certain part-time, people if we have a full-time person available. The problem with the current setup, and Sean would be much better to discuss this, but the issue with the current setup is you have one true person that's just parks to maintain everything, to coordinate all the part-time staffing. I don't know if you guys have worked with part-time staffing or the new part-time staffing. It's definitely taking more supervisory hours to teach, learn, how to get through the day. So it's just with the increased demand, I can't guarantee it will be less positions, but it will be a less reliance on our seasonal, because they work roughly, 20 to 30 hours all summer long. Your part-time guys?
30 to 40.
Yeah, and that is not going to be a resource that's going to be sustainable. It's been a very cheap resource that we've had, but as those individuals maybe consider retiring or no longer wanting to do part-time work, we're going to have to find a way also to backfill. And how are we going to fill those part-time positions going forward?
And to be clear, if we adopt a bare bones financial management plan that has no parks development for the next 10 years, there's still this significant need for this parks position.
Yeah, I would say even 3 or 4 years ago, there was a need. I think the departments have gotten into such a routine of cutting back and saying, okay, this is what the bare bones I need, instead of coming and saying, I need 3 positions. Like, prime example is Public Works. When you compare us to other municipalities, we're probably 2 or 3 positions behind. We're probably 2 or 3 positions behind in utilities. So it's that incrementally asking for positions that have kind of been foregone many years and not hitting the levy all at once. So what's kind of the next critical need up has been kind of the mentality.
I see a theme in some things that have been put off in facilities and staffing that we really do need to catch up on. And I think it's, long awaited. I'm very happy that we'll be able to, I hope that everyone will support this, hire this person earlier than expected in the next calendar year, because we can get them going on shutting down things for the season and trained and helping with snow removal with all the paths we have, and have a backup person to Josh, who's a fantastic parks person for us, and we want to make sure we keep our staff and don't burn them out and make sure everything's maintained well. So happy we're doing well financially that we can think about this.
Heidi, is that motion?
Yep, it is.
Second. I'll second.
All right, we have a first and second then. Any other discussion? Having heard none, all those in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? Any abstain? Motion carries. Next then, we'll move to consideration of the vouchers. Any questions, comments in regards to the vouchers as presented?
I'll make a motion that we approve the vouchers as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and second then. Any other discussion? Having heard none, all those in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? Any abstain? Motion carries. Correspondence, Cindy mentioned that we had a half dozen or so folks that sent out communication in regards to consideration for the library and the budget cycle. So those went to all of the board members. I already mentioned the splash pad, couple of communications that I received over the weekend, and I didn't have anything else. If anybody else has anything to shout out.
I had a phone conversation with Christy Williams last week, and we have decided to have kind of like a monthly meetup between, at least her and me at this point, just to kind of open the lines of communication. So I feel like it's a starting point. She's bringing it up at the town meeting tonight as well. But hopefully we can talk about shared issues or at least start those conversations, and then perhaps eventually it turns into something more. So, and I'm happy to report back on that during the correspondence section of the meetings too.
Okay, thanks. Anything from anybody else? All right, upcoming community events. Chief, you want to put a plug right now?
I'll gladly put a plug right now. Look forward to seeing the community out on August 21st for Community Night Out. Starts at 5 p.m. at Bakken Park. We'll have some great entertainment. The movie that night is Elements, so come on out, enjoy the fun, the festivities, and the community as a whole.
All right.
Thank you to the school district for allowing us to use their license for the movie.
No, thank you to them. Anybody else want to shout or anything else? All right, then future agenda items. Budget. Anything else, Matt, that we need to? All right.
Just professional service. So just again, the month of September is the professional service reviews. So currently kind of have Briar Patch, Strand, Eller, Stafford, Associated, maybe question mark, Baker Tilly, Colonial Club, Waste Management, question mark. Again, we'll refine that list, but I'll get a list sent out. And again, just a 5-minute spiel on 5-10 minute spiel, and allows the board to ask questions about the services.
With that many, let's go 5 minutes, please.
5 minutes heard.
That would be my recommendation. All right. With that, then, I will make a motion then that the board goes into closed session regarding the established and negotiated position relative to assessment services provider. Village of Cottage Grove Village Board will enter a closed session pursuant to Wisconsin State Statute 19.85, parentheses 1, parentheses E, deliberating and negotiating the purchase of public properties, investing in public funds, or conducting other specified public business wherever competitive bargaining reasons require a closed session. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All right. This will be a roll call.
Dahl.
Aye.
Gage. Cal Nelson. Murphy. Stoa.
Yes.
Valencia.
Aye.
And Williams.
Aye.